After years of waiting, Amazon finally brought color to Kindle. But does the Kindle Colorsoft actually live up to the hype? Amazon says it's got everything Kindle fans love about Kindles. Crisp, high-contrast text, weeks of battery life, and a glare-free display. Now with colors, it's meant to make book covers, highlights, annotations, graphs and images more engaging without breaking an immersive reading experience. Building on what the Paperwhite Signature Edition offered, the Colorsoft also adds more storage, an auto-adjusting front light, and even wireless charging. And of course it also got waterproofing and a built-in dual-tone front light as well. But here's the question. Do these features and the addition of color actually enhance the reading experience, or is it more style than substance? And let's just get straight to the point and answer that in the upfront conclusion before going more in-depth later on. So is the Kindle Colorsoft worth it? Well, it depends on what you want to do and what you expect. With its new 7-inch color ink display, the Colorsoft is a great addition for comic lovers and heavy annotators, because it now allows multiple color options for highlights, making it easy to color code annotations with just a few clicks and enhancing the experience over the Paperwhite. The Kindle Colorsoft is also an especially great choice if you love reading comics, not just because of the added colors on the e-reader itself, but mainly due to the Comixology integration, which I'll talk more about later. Just to get to the point, the Kindle ecosystem is still the best when it comes to digital reading, and that includes easy and often cheap access to comics. And of course, also beyond the ecosystem, the Colorsoft itself is better for reading comics than the black and white Paperwhite. The colors are muted, just like with other color e-readers, but that was to be expected, as it uses mostly the same technology as the competition. They even hinted it in its name, Colorsoft. And softer colors are exactly what you get with color ink. More pastel, not the high saturated colors of a smartphone or LCD tablet. But once you stop comparing it side by side with an iPad, the muted colors are more than okay actually. However, the addition of color does come with compromises. The most obvious one: without turning up the front light, the screen is noticeably darker, a limitation all color e-readers with e-ink Kaleido 3 technology have. So if you prefer reading without the front light, consider skipping this generation. This is especially true if you exclusively read pure text ebooks without comics or annotations in the mix. For that use case, a Paperwhite is still a better choice, which is probably why Amazon didn't discontinue the Paperwhite line with the introduction of the Colorsoft. That said, turning up the front light quickly fixes the darker screen, and in everyday use, just a slight adjustment can provide a similar reading experience to the Paperwhite in terms of screen brightness and contrast levels. The second downside worth mentioning before we go more in depth is the slight graininess of the screen. The color filter on top of the e-ink screen not only darkens the display, but also adds a touch of grain. This can be noticeable depending on your reading distance and personal sensitivity, but I'd say with a reading distance of roughly 40 centimeters or 16 inches, it's almost impossible to spot. But the Colorsoft is actually also noticeably better than others in that regard. So I think even fewer people will have an issue with that than on other devices, but it's still something to keep in mind. So is the Colorsoft worth it? Well, yes and no. Yes, if you're big on annotating books or love reading comics, it's great for both, but especially comic book lovers are in for a treat with the guided panels and easy access through Comixology. It's not really worth it if you exclusively read pure text ebooks. Sure, it's nice to have colored ebook covers in your library, but that alone isn't a trade-off I'd recommend at the moment. So in that case, I'd still pick the Kindle Paperwhite Signature Edition, which is essentially the same device, just without the colors. That's it for the upfront conclusion. Like and subscribe if you appreciate this format, and keep watching as I go more in depth and also do a quick side-by-side comparison of the Kindle Colorsoft to other devices. Okay, let's continue with the 7-inch display, which is obviously the heart of the Kindle Colorsoft. I already mentioned the name of the technology in use, e-ink Kaleido 3. Let's also quickly talk about how it works. Same as with the Paperwhite, the e-ink display in the Kindle Colorsoft uses black and white e-ink particles. Those are tiny particles inside microcapsules, and they are moved up and down in the display to create that paper-like viewing experience we all love with e-ink. What makes Kaleido 3 different is the color filter on top of the e-ink screen. There are tiny, translucent red, green and blue subpixels on here that are responsible for generating colors. This RGB layer is passive and doesn't do anything actively, so it's always there and can't be switched off, which results in the mentioned darker screen's background and the slight grain. The graininess is most obvious if you put the Colorsoft next to a Kindle Paperwhite. Where the Paperwhite has a really clean looking screen, the Colorsoft has a very slight haze to it. That said, this effect is actually less noticeable than on the competition. It's hard to capture on camera, but with other Kaleido 3 devices, that grain has a slight shimmering effect to it as well. That's almost absent from the Kindle Colorsoft, which gives the screen a more paper-like feel compared to the competition. I suspect the new light guiding layer for the frontlet is to thank for that improvement. It's supposed to be more directly focused on the screen than before, which definitely seems to do the trick. Because of the dual rendering approach with the color filter on top of the e-ink screen, there are actually two different resolutions on the Kindle Colorsoft. Black and white contents are rendered with 300 ppi and are as crisp as on other Kindles. Colored content is rendered with 150 ppi. Even though it sounds like a huge difference, it's actually not that noticeable in everyday use for most contents. Comics often have black outlines, which are rendered with the higher resolution and mask the lower resolution as a consequence. The 150 ppi are most obvious with tiny colored text, which looks pixelated. But it seems Amazon even optimized that because comparing the same images on the Colorsoft and Kobo Libra Color, it certainly looks like the render quality on the Kindle is better. In terms of color gradients, those look much better on the Kindle Colorsoft. Comparing the devices with my go-to starter comic, the Kindle Colorsoft nails the gradients while they simply look worse on the Libra Color. One of the more surprising features of the Kindle Colorsoft is the option to switch the color style from standard to vivid. Surprising because neither Kobo nor Pocketbook offer an option like this, and both companies would actually benefit from that. Who would have thought that Amazon, of all companies, is the one with an additional customization option like this? And yes, it does make a difference switching to vivid mode. It comes at the cost of a bit of detail and color accuracy, but honestly, I wouldn't be surprised if most people keep using it like this. I definitely will. Which brings us to the frontlet, which is more important than ever on a device like this. Because of the mentioned inherent darkness of the Kaleido 3 screen technology, using the frontlet is essentially a must in my opinion. Not just with the Kindle Colorsoft, but with every Kaleido 3 device. And Amazon nailed it again in this area. They promise at least 94 nits for each new Kindle model. But I measured a staggering 150 nits maximum brightness on the Colorsoft, which is the brightest Kaleido 3 screen I've seen so far, and in all honesty, for color e-ink looks pretty amazing when combining the vivid mode with the maximum brightness setting. Of course, that's not something you typically do all the time because you don't get an e-ink device to blast the frontlet on full brightness the whole time, but it's certainly nice to have the option. Frontlet quality itself is also decent, with a very slight brightness variation across the screen. The only thing I don't like about it is the noticeable yellowish tint on the bottom side. It just reaches the first line of text, and beyond that the screen is very even, so not a huge deal, but if you're as sensitive as I am to irregularities of the frontlet, it can be distracting at times. But it might also be just my specific device and others don't have that problem. There's a light sensor above the display, which can be used to automatically adjust the frontlet brightness, and that option does a pretty good job reducing frontlet brightness to a minimum while still maintaining reading comfort. But even though it works great, I found myself adjusting the frontlet manually more because I tend to set it a bit brighter more often than not. Ghosting behavior is also very good, and I'd say the best implementation on Kaleido 3 I've seen so far. It's not completely gone with image-rich content, but you almost have to look for it most of the time. It's much more obvious with many competitors. Let's quickly compare the Kindle Colorsoft to the Kobo Libra Color, Pocketbook Inkpad Color 3, and Bookstep Mini C, all of which use e-ink Kaleido 3 technology. In terms of color saturation, Kindle Colorsoft, Pocketbook Inkpad Color 3, and Bookstep Mini C are somewhat similar when using the vivid mode on the Kindle. But the Colorsoft is noticeably darker with some colors and generally has a more contrasty look. That also means it preserves details better than the others. When switching to the standard color mode, the Colorsoft moves closer to the Kobo Libre color in terms of color saturation. But again, the colors are a bit darker overall on the Kindle. I will look into the difference between these devices in more detail in a separate video, so like and subscribe to not miss that. Until then, I'd say the Colorsoft has an advantage when it comes to contrast levels and detail, but can sometimes also lose details if images are a bit darker to begin with, and can even seem a bit less vivid even though color saturation is similar to the others. Its biggest advantage definitely comes from the much brighter front light, which improves readability considerably. Just a quick side note, sideloading my PDFs for testing didn't show any colors. Only after sending them through the Send to Kindle function, the colors showed up. Before coming to the software features, let's quickly talk about build quality and haptics, and I don't want to dwell too long on those since the Colorsoft is following the well-proven Kindle formula of many years, for better and for worse. The Colorsoft uses the same housing as the Kindle Paperwhite, so it feels exactly the same when holding it in the hand. The plastic back has a nice feel to it, and the flush display front gives it a modern look and feel. The corners are slightly more rounded than with the previous Paperwhite generation, which makes it more comfortable to hold when placing the corner in the palm of your hand. And there's really nothing wrong with it, but I'm honestly still a bit disappointed that Amazon chose to get rid of page turn buttons altogether with this new Kindle generation, especially because no other company manages to recreate the perfect pressure points of the recently discontinued Kindle Oasis. Okay, let's turn our attention to the software, because with the addition of color, it suddenly looks much nicer than before. I'd say less stale. Like I said, I wouldn't recommend the Kindle Colorsoft just for the colored book covers, but there's no denying that these make for a much nicer user experience. You only realize how much colors are missing from regular black and white e-ink devices once you make the switch. Besides colors, everything stays essentially the same. We get our home screen with the recommendations. You can use the pull down gesture to show their controls, most importantly for frontlight, color style and Bluetooth. And you can also switch to a library, which has the same filtering and sorting options as before. Also worth mentioning, Amazon updated the sleep mode images to be more colorful, and you can finally set book covers as the sleep image. For the longest time, it wasn't possible, and now it's a simple switch in the settings and you're good to go. So let's jump right into the book and check out the reading functions, and then see how much better annotating with colors actually is. The Colorsoft has the same extensive reading features as previous Kindle models. You can change the text style with a couple of different options for font family, boldness, size, as well as margins and spacings. And once you're done with setting it up, you can save those settings as a custom theme and create another one if you like to switch text stylings often. You can also look up words in the dictionary, Wikipedia, or directly translate it through an online translation service. One of the best things about Kindles, and the Colorsoft is no exception, is just how responsive it all feels. Everything feels quick without much delay. That's especially true for selecting text for highlighting or creating notes. Kobo and Kindle are head-to-head when it comes to annotating books, and with the Colorsoft now also adding colors to the mix, it's also on par with the Kindle Libre Color in that regard. You can easily select one of 4 highlight colors from the context menu, giving you the option to color code your annotations, which you can also use for filtering them in the overview. Besides all of that, the Colorsoft also has a vocabulary builder for you to test if you remember the words you looked up in the dictionary. X-ray, which allows you to look up more information about important characters, places, etc. directly from within the book. And Wordwise. That one allows you to increase the line height to directly show explanations of difficult words directly on the page, which can also be useful when learning a new language or reading a complicated text. But that feature needs to be enabled for a title and doesn't work with each book. Colors are obviously a great addition if you love reading comics. The viewing experience is just so much better. Having a Paperwhite side by side with the Colorsoft makes that very clear. And of course, that's also true in comparison to other black and white e-readers. Where it gets really interesting with the Kindle Colorsoft is when we shift our attention away from the device itself for a second and towards the Kindle ecosystem. Roughly 10 years ago, Amazon acquired Comixology, the company that, quote, revolutionized the digital comics reading experience with the immersive guided view technology. And that's still true today and more relevant than ever. Not only do you get easy access to a lot of comics through the Kindle store, I mean, look at that, I downloaded all of those comics with my Kindle Unlimited subscription, which is so much cheaper than buying all of them individually. And I'm not even talking about finding them somewhere else if I didn't use the Kindle Colorsoft. And then there's also the guided view, which is something no one else in the e-reading space has, and it makes reading comics on the somewhat small 7-inch screen actually pretty nice. Just double tap to zoom in and the Colorsoft automatically jumps from panel to panel with a swipe. This is an awesome feature, and because it's integrated natively into the Colorsoft software, it also works much better in terms of ghosting than with the Kindle app on e-ink devices with Android. What's also nice is that you can change the page color, which just changes the background of the page, which helps putting the focus on the zoomed in panel. Weirdly enough, this page color setting seems to have replaced the dark mode of other Kindles. I suspect Amazon just inverted colors with the dark mode, which isn't such a good idea with the color screen now. Same as the rest of the Kindle lineup, the Colorsoft has audiobook support via Audible. Unfortunately, there's still no option to sideload audiobooks from somewhere else, but unsurprisingly, the Audible integration is really comfortable and easy to use. That's essentially the theme with any Kindle. As easy to use as possible with a very low barrier to jump into action. But that's not entirely true for audio playback, because it's not possible directly from the device. You need to connect to a Bluetooth speaker or headphones, because the Kindle Colorsoft doesn't have a built-in speaker. Which of course is okay since this is an e-reader first. What's especially great about the Audible integration is Whisper Sync for voice. That's a function that lets you switch between an ebook and the corresponding audiobook seamlessly. You have to own both, but that synchronization works perfectly fine and is a great option to continue the book if you can't look at the screen. And last but not least, let's quickly talk about battery life. Amazon promises 8 weeks of battery life, with reading for half an hour a day, airplane mode enabled, and a display brightness setting of 13. That's a runtime of 28 hours, which is pretty good. When testing the frontlet with a setting of roughly 45 nits, which is a level of 19 out of 24, and a page turn every 15 seconds, the battery drains at around 4% per hour, which results in a runtime of 25 hours, which is still pretty good and not too far behind the Paperwhite. And what's also great about the Colorsoft is the wireless charging option. With the optionally available wireless charging stand, it's a very convenient set and forget option that definitely adds a lot of comfort and helps to offset the slightly lower battery runtime compared to a Paperwhite a bit. So all in all, the Kindle Colorsoft finally, after years and years of waiting and speculating, brings colors to the Kindle lineup. Even though the technology still has its compromises, I guess Kobo entering the color e-ink race was enough to push Amazon over the edge. And I'm glad it happened, because as it's typically the case with Amazon, they implemented it very well. Sure, it's still Kindle 3 technology with its muted look, but the new LEDs and frontlet getting layer seem to do the trick to make it look a bit better than on the competition. Not a night and day difference, but it's definitely noticeable. All in all, even though there's nothing revolutionary we haven't seen before in the e-ink space in everyday use, the Kindle Colorsoft still managed to impress me with the gradual improvements it brings to the table. Especially the improved paper-like feel of the color screen is obvious when comparing it to the competition. However, what really sets the Kindle Colorsoft apart from the rest is the Kindle ecosystem. It's one of the defining features here. Obviously, it can also be seen as a con as well, because you're locked into that ecosystem. But if you're already a Kindle user or Amazon customer, that's typically less of a concern. And the advantage of the easy-to-use and incredibly well-integrated Kindle and Audible store often outweigh this disadvantage for many. And especially for comic lovers, the Comixology integration with easy access to thousands of comics with the guided panel view makes the whole experience just so much better. Probably the best on any color e-ink device at the moment. That said, if you're exclusively reading pure text ebooks, my recommendation is to stick with the Paperwhite line for now. If you found this review helpful, or if you're interested in the Kindle Colorsoft but also in the competition, then like and subscribe to not miss my future comparisons. Thanks for your time watching, and I'll see you in the next one.